Yo, guys, what's going on? Lucky Cheese 7 is back again to give you guys Attack on Titan Shingeki no Kyojin Season 4, the final season, Part 1. I say Part 1. Oh my god. Let me rephrase that here. So, Season 4, the final chapter is Part 1, or and I hope Crunchyroll does this for the Blu-ray release. I really do. I hope instead of calling it the final season part 3, I hope they call it Attack on Titan the final chapters. Like whenever this comes out on Blu-ray, I hope that's what they call this because shoot, calling it the final season, the final chapters, like that is a mouthful. Oh my god. It's something. Give me just one quick second, you guys. One quick little second. Oh, gotta love the phone calls. Although I'd rather the phone call happen now than happen midway through the stream. But yeah, Final Chapters Part 1. This was interesting because at this point, the manga's already finished. The manga has long since finished. Of course, I know the content of the manga, and for anyone who's anime onlys, don't worry, I'm not going to be talking about spoilers of what's to come for Final Chapters Part 2. That's going to be saved for a different discussion altogether. But I will say for me personally, it's interesting, coming back to Attack on Titan, months after I've kind of distanced myself from the series and just from the fan base. It's been a really interesting experience, just delving into this months after it's come out and just having a chance to step back and relive this again after such a long time. And a lot of this is content that was still somewhat fresh in my mind. So I knew a lot of what was covered here for the final chapters of part 1, which for anyone curious, what was covered in the final chapters part 1 was essentially volume 33. This entire section was volume 33 by itself. So you get, if I'm looking at the chapter titles, you covered the rumbling, you covered the wings of freedom, chapter 133 sinners, and then chapter 134 in the depths of despair. Those are the 4 chapters we cover here for the final chapters part 1. And there were some notable differences that I did notice with Final Chapters Part 1. I'm not going to go into a full in-depth discussion of what happens in the Final Chapters Part 1, but you essentially see the rumbling come into full effect. You see where we left off in in the final season part 2, and the rumbling's just about to begin. To where now we see, you know, the entire playing field being decimated. That's essentially what we get here is that by itself. Which I should say, I made a joke about this in one of the streams I did last year with Mads and with Jada. But a joke I made was, it's kind of interesting how we haven't seen the see you later scene. That was kind of set up all the way back in chapter 1, and up until now it has never shown up once. Like, I always thought that was fascinating because for those of you that don't remember, and for my longtime viewers out there, y'all know I started strictly with the anime first, and then after season one finished, I jumped on board the manga and I read from the beginning. So when I noticed these little small differences here and there, I noticed that the "see you later" scene was never in season one, and that always kind of stuck out to me. I'm like, oh my god, of all the things you take out, why is it that scene that was never brought up? Season two, season three, even like say the final seasons, part one and part two. Like it was never brought up until now. Like and this like in the final chapters, which I will say the "see you later" scene. I've never had a gripe against that. Never have I ever had a gripe against the "see you later" scene. It was a nice scene. Even reading in the manga, I was like, dude, this is actually a really really nice scene to witness. But I will say the placement of it in the anime, it did feel kind of odd that you place it like just before the finale. Like it feels kind of tacked on as opposed to like having it be in season 1. And we know Isayama was like on board for season 1. So you can't necessarily say, "Oh, well, Isayama didn't know." No. Well, the fact of the matter is that he was there for season 1. As far as I can remember, he was there. But to take out like the "see you later" scene, okay, and not bother to do anything with it for the anime until the final chapters. In terms of placement, it's just like okay, it's like just like right before we like end off the anime. That's kind of what we're doing. But it's a nice scene. I can't say it was bad. But I will say this, the rumbling, like that chapter was something else. Like I remember reading that in the manga, and I remember just being on the edge of my seat. I'm like, dude, holy shit! Like I got like the most insane chills when I read that in the manga, and then I remember a lot of people were speculating, what if final season part two ends off with the rumbling? And looking at it now, I think it probably would have been kind of better to end it off that way. It probably would have been like, well, that would have been nuts. But at the same time, that would have been a lot to cram in too. If you think about it, it would have been a lot to cram into final season part two, especially given with how much material they were working with also. But the stuff that was added in, like there were scenes in the rumbling chapter that I didn't see, not that I didn't see, but I noticed that were added on in the anime. Like the guy that kind of just like offed himself. Like I remember looking through that in the manga. I was like, wait, hold on, was that scene there? No, that wasn't there. And also just seeing like the despair of the citizens and then like trying to get away, even like the poor guy who was like driving off and like just trying to get away, him getting like jumped on by other citizens saying, no, we got to get out of here. And ultimately like they got crushed. Like it was like a hard pill to swallow just seeing that. And again, reading that was one thing, I had chills. Watching it though, like my heart sank. Okay, my heart sank when I saw that bit. But not only that, the talk with Aaron and Ramsey, like, and this is a perfect example, by the way, of showcasing emotions and like just really like feeling like gut wrenched. Like that is what this section of the final chapters did. Is that you see the struggle that Aaron is kind of going through, like the mental turmoil of like, man, like like if we do go through with this, if I go through with this, like all these people are gonna go. But maybe if we do what the king does, like if we follow with what King Fritz was doing, it'll be like a small like annihilation. But you also get a sense from Eren that like no, like I can't let that happen. That this is a fate I won't let in the hands of other people. And he mentions that twice. Once here when he was having the internal conflict with himself. And then you have this internal conflict again, not necessarily conflict, but that this stands for Aaron when he's talking to like Armin, Levi, Mikasa, Jean, Connie, when they're trying to beg him to talk, like and say like, "Hey, let's stop this. Like, there's a lot that has already been dealt with. Let's just go back home." And Aaron says no, because if we go through with this, if I stop here, and I just leave it up to chance, like there's no guarantee that Paradis' future is safe. So I have to be the one to keep moving forward to, you know, go through with this. There's no other way around this. And if you are against me, if you truly feel what I'm doing is wrong, end me. That's essentially what he did. He challenged them like, look, if you feel what I'm doing is wrong, feel free to stop me because I ain't stopping. Okay? I will take away the world's freedom and I will not let parody. Actually, let me get the right line of dialogue here just to make it exact. So this is from chapter 133. Yeah, 133. So going from chapter 133, yeah, he says this: I will not stop the rumbling. I won't leave the future of parody to fate. I will keep moving forward. To hold freedom in my own hands, I must take freedom away from the rest of the world. But, and he says this word for word, I will not take anything from you. You are all free. You are even free to defend the freedom of the rest of the world. And I have the freedom to continue moving forward. So as long as we have our own unbreakable convictions, we will collide. Therefore, only one thing remains for us to do, and that is to fight. And obviously, you had Armin like asking Aaron, like, then why call us here? Like, what was the whole point of bringing us in here if that's all you're gonna say? And Aaron brings up one simple fact, and that's essentially this. So I could speak to you and tell you there's no need for us to speak. If you wish to stop me from doing this, you will have to stop me from breathing. You are free to try. And that's the challenge. Like he's challenging them to say, look, if you don't agree with me, end me. That's it. It's either you stop me or I go through with this. And there's no other way around it, which shows Aaron's convictions in a big way. And again, reading that scene in the manga was so powerful. But watching it, like again, all of this encapsulated or captured volume 33 just entirely. And with what Mappa did, just from an animation standpoint, from especially the OST. Oh my god, like the OST, the timing of everything and the way you see how fluid it was, like it was incredible just to witness what they did. Not only that though, we got to talk about Hanji. Like, and I said this even before we got the ending in the manga, but I did actually feel bad for Hanji. I remember reading chapter 132 and knowing that Hanji was gonna go out, I was like, shit, like I kind of felt bad for her when it came to the manga, but the anime took it again to a whole nother level. Like it took it a step notch. Um when you see, like, her love of Titans and her, giving them a chance to escape, essentially, but also seeing that, she's going all out, like guns blazing and everything. And actually, let me look back on this. So, if we're looking at that chapter in particular, so looking through that, let me see. Got Hanji. Yeah, so let's see how many times she took down in the manga because it didn't seem like she took out a lot. But that's why I've got the volume up at the moment just to see the differences. But like you see her having like this big like a send off. She gives Armin the reins of being the new commander of the Survey Corps, which was nice. It was definitely nice. And then of course you got the feeling of the rumbling. Dedicate your heart from Levi. It's the first time I ever heard you say that. And then yeah, like again, this shot was just amazing. So let's see. Titans truly are magnificent. Going through each attack. So she takes out one. So one Titan falls. Two Titans fall. Yeah, so in the manga, it looks like she only took out like a few of them. At the very least, that's what it looks like, right? But in the anime, she takes out like more than just a few. At the very least, I would say maybe 10. Maybe. I gotta like actually look back at this and like do like an estimate count, but it looked like she took out more than just a few. And again, the OST that played in the background for that moment, I thought was beautiful. It was like a beautiful moment, a beautiful send off. And then there was the whole thing with Flock too. Holy shit! Like Flock was a G. Okay, Flock stood his ground in believing in what he believed in for parody. Okay, he said, "Look, the island's future, very much like Eren. Okay, if we do this, if we succeed, we wipe out the world. Parody is safe." And it highlights a point and a huge major flaw for the Alliance. At the very least, for Armin, Mikasa, Levi, and Hanji, and Jean and Connie. That's at least what, 6 members of the Alliance? Versus like it highlights a major flaw in that, like, yo, if we stop Eren, stop the rumbling, parody is like doomed. And there's no other way around it. But I've always said this. As far as the alliance goes, I get the perspective from Reiner, Annie, Falco, Gabby, and Peak. I got their perspective all together. It's the ones from Parody that was kind of like, well, okay, the rumbling has now happened, and we realize we fucked up big time. We realize we messed up big time, and well, let's help y'all out. Like it just seems sudden. Like like you go from where you were in War for Parody, and then when you hit the rumbling arc, it's like shit. Like we wish this upon them. Yeah, like let's not do that. Like that is the one major flaw at the very least on the side of Parody. I will say, but again, that's neither here. Nor there. That's a discussion that has gone on for so long. And personally, it's a topic of discussion that I don't really think needs to be delved into too much. But you do see like there was a flaw there for the alliance, at least for the side of parody. For Marley, I totally get where they're coming from. It's understandable. And speaking of things, did y'all catch the little exchange between Mikasa and Annie? We're like, yo, when did this happen? The whole case with um Annie and Armin being a thing, which I'm not gonna say it was necessarily bad because I did have it in the manga too. But again, Like, it's fascinating to witness because you kind of see where their relationship was like at the very start, and you an argument could be made that, well, okay, Armin and Annie kind of did somewhat have a thing going for them. When I say somewhat, it wasn't like so explicit that, like, yeah, they were like totally into each other, but there was like small hints here and there throughout the final season, not the final season, but throughout season one, that, like, yes, this there is something there, but it was never like a huge forefront, if you will. And if anything, like, it showcased how they both kind of used one another. So when you get to the point of where we're at in, the final chapters, it is kind of one of those things that's like, wait a second. Maybe Aaron has a point here about with what he told Armin. Like, yo, you've gotten soft after eating Bertold. Like, are you sure those are your feelings, or are those feelings of, Bertold? Because Bertold, like, had a huge infatuation for Annie. So are you sure that's really you? Or are you sure you're not letting Bertold's will overcloud your judgment? And I still think that at the very least, Aaron does have a point when you look at that aspect. Definitely. But regardless of that, let's see here. So looking at this, you get Aaron's objective through a small little flashback from Yelena as to what he's gonna do. And it's like after Liberio, there's this one small section in Fort Salta, and that's kind of where like the whole Air Force base is. And if you want to go a little further and take them out, feel free. Basically, this after the attack on Liberio, we'll give the Allies about a month to gather there. You will come into contact with Zeke, and the two of you will gain the power of the Founding Titan. Then you'll activate a limited rumbling. Use a few hundred Titans from the outer walls of Shinganshina District. That should polish off the Allies with no problems. And then Aaron asks, is that the only objective they'll pursue? Will that really be enough to keep them away from parity for decades? And Yelena says, a nation that loses its warships will be driven to financial collapse. It'll be more than enough. Just as long as we hit every nation, I'm sure we will succeed. But there is this fortress in the mountains of southern Marley. If I had to worry about something, I'd choose the airship research base there. And that pretty much gave Aaron a heads up of like, okay, outside of the military base, there is like this airship base as like a backup. So if you want to strike further, there's that. And really, when you think about the final season, it's actually kind of fitting that you start where you began, because the final season opens up with us in Fort Salta. Granted, it's from the perspective of Falco and Gabby and Reiner and Zeke. It's more so from them. That being said, though, it's also kind of, like I said, it's interesting that you start the season off in Fort Salta, and then here, with where we are in the final chapters, that's the final spot, the final destination spot of where this climactic battle is going to take place. And like, I don't know, like and I've said this. I don't know if I said this when I did the streams for the chapters. I think I might have, but I do find it again fascinating and fitting that we ended off in Fort Salta. Definitely, 100%. But I know a lot of people want me to talk about this, and that is a difference that came from the manga. So in chapter 131, like at the very end when you have that conversation, like at the tail end when Armin and Annie are talking. So Armin has this line where if I can find, he says, "No, it wasn't the world we dreamed of, but I want to believe that there's still a place we know nothing about, somewhere beyond the walls." And in the manga, for a lot of you guys that have read it, Aaron's eyes were closed. Like his eyes were like dead set closed the whole time when it came to that scene. In the anime, his eyes were open, and you see him feeling like that sense of guilt of what he's doing. And I know a lot of AoE theorists are like kind of have been theory crafting about that for like ages. Like, wait, why have a change like that from the manga? Why have his eyes be open in the anime, but have his eyes be closed in the manga? Doesn't really add up, right? And I've got two explanations for it. It's either a creative approach to showcase of Eren feeling like really bad about what's going down, which I believe that's what it is, or the possibility of an AoE. Now, if I'm to play percentage game here, I'm like 70% convinced that that scene by itself is just, you know, a creative approach to showcase that, like, no, he's not just asleep. He's witnessing all of this go down. And in a sense, it's kind of like with what Reiner said, that it's kind of tearing him apart, like deep down. And without even saying a word, it's just him, like, just noticing it. Where he is going through with the rumbling, but you kind of see the mental turmoil that he's kind of feeling like just through his eyes. And I think looking at it like that, it's a very powerful scene for sure. And I don't think anybody can argue about that. But again, if that does lead to a possibility of AoE, I mean, I'd be curious. Not gonna lie, I'd be really, really curious as to what that's gonna be. But also, have y'all noticed Aaron's eyes? Like when he's in his founding Titan form? So at the end of season, the final season part two, right? His eyes were green, like straight up green. And for this, when you have Armin and the other members of the Alliance, like when they're like landing on top of the founding Titan, and you see Aaron's eyes, the founder's eyes, if you will. Notice how they're like kind of clear. They're not green anymore. So there are two things I can gather from that. Either it's an animation error. Someone probably forgot to just like color in the eyes to make it green, or there's something else. Something else that we're not sure about. Maybe the Berserk Titan? Like, if there's one thing I do want to say, I do hope we get some inkling of the Berserk Titan here, because where we end off for the final chapters part one is them like just landing on top of like the founding Titan, and like just before the battle begins. So part of me does hope on that aspect. We do see like the abilities of like the other Titans. Like say Aaron utilizing the Warhammer Titan. Something he didn't really exactly do in the manga. And much like again, the Berserk Titan was anime only. So I think it'd be really cool if like, you tie it back in and like you have that be a factor in in the final chapters part 2. I think that can it would be a good way to tie it in my opinion, because it would lead you to think like, okay, you have this one little instance of Aaron doing something for the anime by itself, and he's only used it once, right? Wouldn't it be cool to just see him like kind of bring it back and use it here for like the last episode? I mean, think about it like this. I look at Naruto. When it came to Naruto versus Sasuke in the manga, it was alright. But like when you consider the build up to part two, when you're seeing like everything led to that, it was like it's like man, there was more you could have gone for in the manga. But the anime took a few different approaches here. It only extended the fight scenes out, but you got a few different of seeing the choreography and like different like ninjutsus being used. Like Sasuke used Kirin once, okay, and that was against Itachi. And what I loved that Shippuden did in that final fight is that he utilized Kirin a second time in that final fight. So much like with Shippuden, I am hoping that when it comes to the final chapters part two, that we do see some usage of the berserk type. I do hope that. But there's also one other thing I need to talk about too, and that's Historia. Because in chapter 134, it starts up and like she's like in the process of giving birth. Okay? Right as the rumbling is like about to like unfold. It's kind of odd that they take that scene out. At the very least to me. It's like you have that moment and you know there's like a huge like symbolism aspect for that. And actually there's one other scene that they skipped out on too. There's a scene where you've got a group of citizens, Marlians, like like praying like as like the wall titans are like coming forward, right? Like as the rumbling's happening, and one of them's like holding a kid, like a small tiny baby. That scene's nowhere to be seen here too. So it's fascinating, okay? And I know I've been saying that a lot, but it really is like interesting that you have certain scenes that are like not present at all. And again, maybe it's a case of like we'll see it in final chapters part two. It could be that case too. But I don't know, I don't know, stuff like that just kind of stood out to me. Another thing I do want to point out here is that you have the whole conversation from one of the generals. Let me look up his name real quick. Pretty much the one who was like in charge of like the whole operation of Marley, and he kind of was like the head above Magath. So you had him like making this whole big speech about like the wrongdoings of what they Marley as a whole you know put all the blame onto the island of Parody, and then because of that, that led to Eren essentially doing his whole you know not mindset, if you will, but his whole objective of taking down the Marley because they feel responsible for what they did. And I know some people are probably going to sympathize with that, but you know what? I'm sorry. By that point, it's like a little too late. Like, you want to sit here and tell me that doing all of that and like in the moments of despair of like tragedy, like you all of a sudden go like, oh man, like I feel so bad, I feel so shitty, we were all wrong. No, by that point, like you're done. I'm sorry, like at that point in time there's no going back. Like you can't just sit here and say, oh man, I cannot believe what I did, like I wish I could take it all back. Well, I'm sorry to say this, but like once something is set in stone, like there's no way to reverse it. And the same thing goes for, you know, the parents. Karina, for example, talking about like how she only used Reiner as a tool and she never saw him as anything more than that. She never treated him like a true son. Al, again, the same point still stands. It's too late. You used him at that point. And again, it's only taking this moment right here for the parents, the Warriors' parents, to realize that they messed up. And I'm sorry, just like y'all put all this shit, all this blame on Parody, and it's again taking just this moment right here for all of them to be like, we fucked up. Sorry, that's not how it works. Because you know their whole little belief, their whole little faith that it was their fault. They're the ones that sent the female Titan, the armored Titan, the colossal Titan. All of this started because of them, right? So the blame does not go to Parody on that. The blame goes to them. And no one can argue with that. Because if they didn't do what they did, I'm 100% sure what happened on Parody with Eren, Mikasa, Armin, Historia, Jean, Connie, none of that would have occurred if it wasn't for that. Okay? I know people want to play like, defensive cards and like certain characters, but like, it's already set in stone. You know? But again, it's a topic of discussion that I actually really, really do like because it does showcase that yeah, you did mess up. But the only thing you could do if a situation were to occur and like you were free, yeah, maybe they could do better. But in that moment, at that point in time, again, it's too late. But I'm pretty sure y'all are also probably wondering like what my overall thoughts are on the final chapters part one. Now, again, I did have a few gripes. Again, as good as the see you later scene was, I do think again placing it here, like just before like the series wraps up, placement is a little odd. Like if I were to pick, I would have said maybe if you wanted to, you could have had that like essay at the very start of the final season. That way, it's a little bit more better, personally. But I guess it does also show that maybe having a scene like as monumental as that, if that was still just like at the very beginning, you know, it would have at the very least like flowed better. At the very least, because now it's gonna look like for anime onlys, like this just got tacked on. Like that does not feel natural at all. I mean, again, you're learning a piece of the story that up until that point you didn't know about, but looking at it through the manga, it's like no, that scene's always been there. You know, which is going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the final chapter because it's like oh, just one. It's like okay, just one episode ago, you showcase that scene, and then the next episode, oh, okay, like and I'm not gonna spoil what it is for anime only, but for anyone who's a manga reader, y'all know specifically what I'm referring to. Y'all know full well with what I'm referring to, and it's oh man, it's I'm really curious with what part two is gonna offer. I really am. But to say the least, My thoughts on the final chapters, part one. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it's amazing. It's an amazing rating. I did think about Amazing Plus, and I didn't want to give it pure perfection because again, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't a pure perfection by any means, but definitely the content, okay, of what it had with what we were covering, seeing again Aaron's side of things, seeing this little portion of what we never would have thought was going to come uh, of the see you later scene. I thought was again good, placement a little off, obviously when compared to the manga, but still nice. Hanji getting a send off that I thought was much more powerful here in the anime versus the manga. And again, the manga scene was still really good, but I think the anime like really kicked it off in a high gear in more ways than one. And again, seeing these little add-ons that weren't present in the manga, such as when the citizens were like, like trying to fend for their life and like really kind of showcasing like how desperate they were. I know it's a little messed up for me to say, but little touches like that I think do add a lot more to that scene. And I don't think anyone can deny that. I really don't. It was great. But other little nitpicks I could probably name off. Maybe even say criticisms, but seeing like Jean and Connie and them like talking about like like giving Annie like their farewell, like being all cheerful and everything. That to me did feel a little odd given the history of like what they've been through. But they talk about that in the episode too, so I can't really say it's too much. But let me see here. When we're looking at like the whole conversation between Mikasa and Annie, let me see here. So talk about stuff like did they actually? I'm curious. Did they actually talk about those things? Um. Okay, so that was actually in the manga. I forgot about that. So because Mikasa just noticed and she's like, "Hey, when did this start?" So I thought that was strictly just an anime scene, but no. Like looking back on it now, that is definitely 100% like with the manga. But the way we end this off with the alliance or with what's left of them going through, landing on top of the founding titan, and you have Armin asking Eren, like, you're not gonna like with what I'm gonna say, but I have to ask, like, when we drag you out of there, you know, from the founding titan, like what exactly are you, or not, and what, but like how exactly are you free? And you will answer me once we drag you out of there. And I still remember, like, getting to this part in Volume 33, like, even when this came out monthly, too, like, just seeing that scene, right? Reiner transforming, like, holding on to the Beast Titan, and just getting that scene in the manga was great. It was a really great scene. And I think with the way how the anime ends, not necessarily, okay, not the anime, but with how this part ends, I think it speaks volumes. It really does speak volumes. And I can just imagine for all the anime onlys how they reacted. When this dropped, like I could just imagine them like getting to this part of the episode and like when it cut it off, they were like, "What? We gotta wait again?" So I think I did a good thing of like just holding off the final chapters part one and 10 out because Like for me now, it's like only just a matter of weeks as opposed to waiting like months and months ahead of time. And again, it's going to be really interesting to see where we go with the final chapters part 2. And I'm not going to lie, it's going to be kind of emotional too for me because this anime has really been with me for the betterment of the last 10 years when it first came out. And I remember when the manga ended that I told myself, I don't know if I would find myself being invested in watching part 2, but then, knowing which parts are coming up, I was curious to see with what part 2 was going to offer. And then, I'm here now. I'm here now to talk about it. And considering that it's going to be the true finale of the anime, emotions are going to run deep for sure. And I'm curious with what they're going to keep, what they're going to take out, what they could alter too, for the betterment or for the worse. But aside from that, you guys, that's pretty much all I got to say when it comes to Attack on Titan, the final season, final chapters, part 1. Let me know what you guys' thoughts were on the final chapters, part 1. What was your favorite part about it? Did you have any gripes about it like I did? And how are you guys feeling about the final chapters, part 2 dropping soon? Let me know what you guys' thoughts are in the comments down below. And aside from that, guys, that's pretty much it. I'm Lucky7. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more Attack on Titan, or at the very least, with what we have left of it now. And I will catch you guys next time. Peace.